Okay, now that you have taken care of the prerequisites, you can move on to the actual configuration of your system to enable interoperability. When a user logs into a Linux system, the username and password combination must be verified or authenticated as a valid and active user. Sometimes the information to verify the user is located on the local system, and other times the system defers the authentication to a user database on a remote system. The Authentication Configuration tool provides a graphical interface for configuring user information retrieval from a central authentication server. For instance, our Windows Active Directory server. Let's go ahead and configure it now. Click on the System menu, then from the sub-menu select Administration, and then Authentication. A new dialog box pops up. This is the Authentication Configuration tool. Here, you can configure how the users will be authenticated. Currently, the user account database is configured to be a local user database. Let's change this value to WinBind. As you switch the selection, some new input fields show up which will help you to configure the particulars of your Windows Active Directory domain. Once these settings have been applied, the Linux host will be able to communicate with the Windows Active Directory server and make authentication requests. The end effect will be that any Windows domain user will be able to log into this Linux host using their network credentials. Okay, now let's specify the values and join this Linux system to the Windows domain. First, we need to specify the WinBind domain. The value specifies the Windows domain identifier. The domain identifier in this case is tetranoodle. Let's type that in. Now, these are essential values which must be specified accurately for your integration to work. Let's double check them. Switch to our Windows server, launch the Server Manager, click on Tools, select Active Directory Users and Computers, also called ADUC. On the left panel, find and right-click on the domain node. In our case, it is this tetranoodle.com node. Go to Properties. Here, the domain name is tetranoodle, which is exactly the value we typed in the WinBind configuration. Excellent. Now, let's switch to the Linux system and continue configuring the Linux host. Next is Security Model. This value sets the security model to use for Linux clients. The correct value is ads that configures this Linux host to act as a domain member in an Active Directory server realm. So let's select ads here. Next, we have WinBind ads realm. This specifies the Active Directory realm that Linux host will join. In this case, the value for WinBind ads realm is tetranoodle.com. Then, WinBind Domain Controllers provides the host name or IP address of the domain controller to use. We only have one domain controller in this network, so we will specify the fully qualified name for the Windows Domain Controller server, tetranoodledc.tetranoodle.com. Let's verify this domain controller name as well. Go back to the Server Manager for our Windows server, select the Domain Controllers node. On the right side, you see we have one server listed in the list of domain controllers. Right-click on the host and go to Properties, and here you go. This is the Windows Domain Controller server's full name, which is exactly what we specified for the Linux host configuration. Great! So far, so good. Next, we have Template Shell. This sets which login shell to use for Windows user account settings. This setting is optional. Bash is the most popular shell on Linux platform, and most people are familiar with it. So let's select that one. Allow offline login allows authentication information to be stored in a local cache. The cache is referenced with a user's attempts to authenticate to system resources while the system is offline. Now, this setting can be a convenient thing for the users who are always on the go, but it also has security implications, so please do select this option carefully. For now, we will skip this value. Go to the Next tab, Advanced Options. Here, under the Other Authentication Options section, let's make sure you check this checkbox to create home directories on the first login. This setting is necessary because it will enable users to log in and start using the Linux host without worrying about provisioning new home directories manually. Now, let's switch back to the Identity and Authentication tab. And finally, click on Join Domain. A new dialog box pops up, prompting us to save the configuration. Let's click on Save. Now, it's asking for the domain administrator and password. We need an account on the Windows domain which has the permissions to join new hosts to the domain. If you have the admin credentials, you can use them here, or you will need another valid domain user who has the necessary permissions. In our case, we will use our domain administrator credentials and click OK to authenticate ourselves. Click on Apply. With that, the Linux system is now joined to the domain controller. Great! Now, to verify the authentication process, let's exit from the terminal and log out from this Linux system. And in the meantime, let's switch to the Windows domain controller and verify whether the Linux host is actually registered in the domain. Here we are in the Active Directory Users and Computers Management console. If you select the Computers node, you will see our Linux host with the name of Linux 1 is listed on the right-hand side. Let's right-click on it and click on Properties. You will notice the fully qualified name here is linux1.tetranoodle.com, which is the exact host name we specified for the Linux host. Great! So this Linux host is now a part of this Windows domain. Now, for better organization, let's move this computer to its respective Windows domain OU. First, let's create the OU. Select System from the panel on the left, right-click on System, select New, and then select Organizational Unit, or OU. Name this OU Linux. Uncheck the checkbox Protect Container from Accidental Deletion. Click on OK. So you can see a new OU has been created under Systems node. Now go back to Computers, right-click on Linux 1, and select Move. Then go to Systems and select Linux OU, and click on OK. Now, the Linux system has been moved to the Linux OU.